This is Glambition Radio, episode number 215 with Kate Northrup, author of Do Less. Welcome to Glambition Radio. I am your host, Allie Brown. I'm an entrepreneur, mentor, investor, and mom of twins. I love thinking big, doing different, and exploring ideas that disrupt the status quo, especially when it comes to women. Because we are rewriting the rules for leadership, business success, making money, and changing the world. And we're doing it with style. Let's go. It's always inspiring to have a guest that, had a clear mission from the start and was dead set on what they wanted and went after it and reached their goals. But I'll tell you, it's even more inspiring at times to have the guests on who found their way into their purpose and who they've become and what they're really here to do in a way that's not conventional, just by following what they were feeling, by following where they thought they should be, by acting on opportunities that had opened. And that's why I'm really happy to have Kate Northrup on the show today. Her new book is called Do Less, A Revolutionary Approach to Time and Energy Management for Ambitious Women. And the content is very interesting. I mean, based around your feminine cycles and just, really goes there. And I thought, I'd love to get her on the show and talk about this. Also, her past book, Money, A Love Story, and how her very unconventional upbringing really gave her this truth of wisdom and learning to question everything, which I think is becoming increasingly important right now as you see what's going on in the world. And before we get to the interview, though, a few quick reminders. The first is we have a few of those journals left, and I'd love to give you one. Go to glambitiongiveaway.com. If you have written us a review recently or would like to write us one now on iTunes, this is my way of saying thank you, and we'd love to get one of these in the mail to you. So all the details are at glambitiongiveaway.com. It's super simple, though. Why not get one of these? You can go to the site right now and see how beautiful they are, and it can be your special place to take notes on all these shows, the inspiration, the ideas, the visions that come to you while you're hearing these amazing conversations with these women. And speaking of reviews, I'd love to give a shout out to 2 great reviews that came in. My team grabbed for me off iTunes. Let's go. 5 stars by Lee Soultopia from Australia. Allie is disrupting our world as female entrepreneurs. The podcast shows me the path has been walked before me. I am not alone. Through Allie and her truly mind-blowingly successful guests, I'm inspired to keep raising the bar for myself, to believe in the value of me and my ambitions to serve and prosper at the same time. Oh, I like that. Thank you, Lee. And next is 5 stars by Fierce Gemma from the UK. Can't get enough. Love listening to the amazing and inspiring conversations Allie has with her guest. What a fantastic combination of humor and honesty. You can't help but immerse yourself and feel as though you are part of the discussion. And my last reminder is that today's show is sponsored by The Trust, the new private premier network for 7- and 8-figure women entrepreneurs. If you or another female leader is craving more powerful connections, more elevated, honest conversation, and a modern platform for connecting with other high-performing women globally, visit jointhetrust.org for details and to request a brief informational interview. We have a very special event coming up in September. I'll be sharing more details as we get closer, but right now is the time to indicate if you are interested. Jointhetrust.org. Now get ready for an adventurous conversation with Kate Northrup. Kate, I'd like to know where you are at this moment.
I am in my office in a little town in Maine.
I picture it kind of like, what am I thinking? Like Murder, She Wrote? Like that kind of town?
It's very much like that.
Like Angela Lansbury's going to walk down the main street.
Yeah. It's like, basket. Churches, historical homes, a harbor.
Yep. Is this where you grew up?
It is.
And you never wanted to leave?
I did. Well, so I like to be clear that while I am a townie, I did leave for 10 years and I saw I lived in New York City for 6. I lived in Providence, Rhode Island for 4. And then I traveled the country with my husband. And after all of that, I was still like, you know what? My tiny town in Maine is still the best place I've ever lived.
I love it. I love that. I'm just so fascinated. Yeah, that's just fascinating. I didn't mean to question your choices. I was just wow.
Fine. It is funny though, because like people will say, oh, so you went to high school here? And I can see that. I'm like, yes, but I left. I did leave.
That's not where I peaked, in my career.
Listen, I know I have dear friends who didn't leave, and I also love their choice as well.
Exactly. So I'm so excited to finally get you on, because I've been, when someone's kind of on your radar for a while, and then you may hear something or finally see something, then you're like, I'm going in after him. And you were on one of my clients' podcasts, Dr. Valerie Rain. It was an amazing conversation. And it sparked me again. I'm like, I'm going to reach out to Kate and have her on the show. There's so many themes that you talk about that are even more important in this current time for the women listening. But can we start by going back to a bit about your childhood and, how you became Kate Northrup over the years?
Yeah. Do you want me to start anywhere in particular?
Well, there was a particular story that I read in the beginning of the Do Less. And it was was it in the beginning of Do Less, or was it? Yeah. It was maybe in an interview that you did. And it was about growing up. Your mom was a real, I don't know even how to describe her, women's health pioneer in us honoring our bodies and ourselves and celebrating our natural cycles and just this whole new way of looking at ourselves. And growing up, you wrote something saying like, I was not thrilled that this was my mom. I wanted her to be normal. I did not want my period celebrated, when it happened. And it was just interesting to see there was some resistance there to kind of, I think that seems opposite to who you are today.
That's so true. Yeah. I mean, my mom continues to be an outlier. And when I was growing up in this small town, I think one of the things that is one of my soul's lessons is being willing to stand out. And and go against the grain. And like so many women in particular, I think I grew up wanting to fit in and please people, because our culture teaches us on some level that our job is to be here to make other people feel happy and comfortable. And my mom just didn't do that ever. And it was so deeply embarrassing to me, especially in a small town where everyone knows everyone and everyone talks about, it's like, she was doing goddess mystery school, back in the 70s. And she was definitely ahead of her time in many ways. And so she really she had, for my sister, when she got her period, she had this blessing ceremony, which in retrospect was really beautiful. And my dad brought flowers home for dinner, and there was this thing with a red ribbon, and I don't know all the specifics, but I remember being a little girl and just watching it and being kind of horrified, which is so funny. And I said to my mom, when I got my period, I was devastated. And I spent the whole day in bed just crying. I think I was just so sad about what I don't think I could have articulated it at the time, but being female in our culture is complicated. And being a woman in our culture is complicated. And I think that I was privy to what I was stepping into and the freedom that I was letting go of in some ways.
That is heavy. That's huge. It's like you're entering through the gate into the complexity of being a woman. And that's, wow.
So it's really intense. And so I said to my mom, don't bless me. You can't invite your friends over to bless me. And whatever you do, don't tell dad. And so that was sort of when I got my first period, but it wasn't until then later on, as you alluded to, I sort of came back around and I was like, actually, this whole cycle thing is kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause what's fascinating, it's a big part of your book. And that's why it was so interesting to see over the years. It's very interesting. The clients I work with, there are a few who actually work with their cycles. They time their cycles, they calendar it, and they put their workflow in an aligned way with the cycles. And you're the first person I saw really write about that in a very public way.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. So what, where did you go to school for? What happened after
Oh, well,
What was your 20s about?
I thought that I was going to be an art dealer, and I went to school for art history. So I hold a BA in the history of art and architecture. And so I'm not using that, but I thought maybe I would go into real estate development. And so I moved to New York City, and I sort of had this dream of going into real estate development. But then I was in the network marketing industry with a supplement company, and that business kind of took off. And I really just loved the freedom of being an entrepreneur. So ultimately I never ended up going to get a job. I just kind of did the entrepreneurial thing. And my 20s were about a lot of adventures in New York City. And,
now, what years were this? Could you give us context? Was it like the Sex and the City years?
So
was it
a little bit after? So let's see.
Okay.
I moved to New York in 2005.
Yep.
And I left in 2011.
Okay. Just for context.
I was 22 to 27 or 28 in those years, which is the greatest time ever to spend in New York City. But I got myself into a whole load of credit card debt, and I was really in this financial pickle where I was chronically overspending. I was brutally unaware of what was going on with my finances, and I was living in an apartment that my mom owned, like doing it just so not stepping into adulthood in terms of I had this successful business and I made way more money than my friends, but I also spent way more money. Like I was a chronic money avoider. And so my experience leaving New York was a lot about sobering up financially and getting really real with myself and finally growing up. And I had gone into business with my mom. We ended up separating our businesses at that same time. And it was this sort of brutal at the time, but awesome experience of what is the word called when you, I can't remember. There's like a psychology term for when you're enmeshed and then you individuate. Yes. So this process of individuating. And
is that what I should call my 20s?
Yeah.
the shit show known as my 20s. Trying everything on. Yeah. Okay.
And then I ended up writing a book about that journey and the steps I went through called Money, A Love Story.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how I started ending up doing what I do now, which is, I don't even really know what I do, but the writing and the having courses and the teaching thing sort of happened totally by accident.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing what you've done, looking at where you came from and how, do you think the message was spot on? Do you think it was just the right thing at the right time for the right women? What was the money book about? Why was it such a success?
I so wish I had like a great answer for you. I don't know. I mean, what happened is I ended up giving this talk. So I was teaching these workshops. This is just a great reminder that like we have to trust the next right thing. I did not have this grandmaster plan to like write a book and do a thing. I was teaching these workshops called Women and Wealth, and I was driving around the country with my now husband, who I had randomly invited to drive across the country with me. I barely knew him. And we ended up living out of my car together for 10 months, which was supposed to be 5 days, turned into 10 months. So during that time, I was teaching these workshops called Women and Wealth around the country. And they were teaching some of the financial literacy stuff that I had learned as I was getting myself out of debt and basically, sobering up around money. But I was teaching it from this perspective of, okay, what if financial literacy felt like pleasure? What if we actually used love and joy and fun in the process as opposed to making it punitive? But those workshops were actually lead generators for my network marketing business at the time. But then I got invited to teach that workshop as like part of an actual conference. And so I dropped the pitch part and taught the workshop. And I was like, whoa, this actually, like it was one of the most powerful experiences I have had as a speaker, because the women were just wrapped. I mean, they were just there. And I felt so, those moments where you're just doing your work and you're like, this is what I'm here to do. And I didn't even like I was doing it, like it was being done through me. And it happened to be that my future editor was sitting at the workshop. And so she ended up asking me to write a book on the topic, but but it wasn't like, I didn't do that on purpose.
Wow. That's amazing. And something to consider. I mean, your lead gen strategy turned into your whole
I know.
business.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. Yeah. But you were listening. You were listening and you were paying attention. You're going like, oh, wow, this is the thing. This is what they need. This is what I love. This is what's just flowing through me. This feels effortless.
Yeah. Like I thought I was selling supplements, but that's not what I was doing.
How did the supplements move into the wealth? Okay. How'd you connect that? Like with the wealth and health and wealth?
Well, it was because it was a lead gen for the business aspect of
got it.
Yeah. Right. So it was, yeah.
Got it. Oh, very smart. Very smart.
It worked. It worked. I built a 6-figure network marketing business.
Yeah. Now, so Money Love Story comes out, published in 5 languages. I know you also do courses and all these things. Let's talk about the do less, because that really got my attention when you came out with that message. And I know that you went back and forth on the busy mom part of the title. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes.
Did it sound too like Good Housekeeping? Like what?
Totally. Oh my God. If you met me, you would, well, I think you've probably gathered enough in this conversation. I'm super not good housekeeping. And so, despite me wanting my mother to be when I was growing up, it turns out I am also the weird mom. Now that I have my own kids, I'm like, oh, yep. They're going to go through the same thing. I'm definitely the weirdo on the cul-de-sac. And so this subtitle was, so it was Do Less, a revolutionary approach to time and energy management for busy moms. And what happened is, quite frankly, I'm always very transparent. And the truth is, when it came down for the final edits of the book to be due, I had a newborn and a toddler, and my husband was extremely ill. And so even though the subtitle didn't totally feel right, and I actually wanted to write the book, I wanted to change the book by that time so it was more inclusive, so that a woman who had chosen not to have children, or who had not felt that she had that choice, wouldn't feel that it wasn't for her. But I didn't have the bandwidth. I had to do less and just like put out the book. And then 6 months later, after the book came out, I convinced my publisher to let me do a rewrite. And so I came out with a revised version in paperback 1 year after the first version came out, and the new subtitle plus edits to the whole content of the book. But the new subtitle is A Revolutionary Approach to Time and Energy Management for Ambitious Women, which feels like really exactly what it is.
And I still hope that there's stuff for moms in there, right?
Tons of stuff for moms.
That's a game changer. I think I have twins. They just turned 7.
Oh, wow.
And man, I related to the stories you were telling, in that like you get ruthless then with your time. Like nothing in the history of my career, and I've had many, has gotten me that clear on what I am interested in and not interested in, because I literally don't have the time or energy. And it's a huge liberator in a way.
Oh, it so is. Just the like, I have 0 F's to give. It's like, I have for you, I have these 2 beings dependent upon me for their survival. I don't have time for your bullshit. Or for the thing that doesn't light me up.
I'm going to have a button and wear that around town right now. I don't have time for your bullshit. That, and I'm not participating in COVID, but that's another show. I'd have some buttons made for everybody. So what is the core, or like, how was this so different, the do less message, compared to like everything else out there?
Well, everything else out there on time management that I had found was either written by men or written by women who felt like they should be being men. And what I learned from Elisa Vitti, who wrote the book Woman Code, is that men cycle hormonally every 24 hours. So they have this sort of like clock that resets every 24 hours. Women cycle hormonally every 28 days while we're in our reproductive years. So we have, and both men and women have the same 4 phases of their cycle. So there are these 4 distinct phases of our cycles, but men have them every 24 hours. Women have them every 28 days. And what's so amazing about that, when you look at it, of course, is that our whole calendar system and the way we do life is set up for a 24-hour cycle. Now, P.S., that's also how the sun works, so it makes sense. But as women, so many of us are trying to fit ourselves into showing up and being the same every day, and ideally more energized and more focused and, more fit. And like we're always trying to just be the same or better day after day. And we are actually just not designed that way. We are designed with these ebbs and flows cyclically that are incredibly predictable and incredibly useful, but they just don't fit into the 24-hour model. So for me, as like a student of time management, my whole life and productivity, I've always been obsessed. But I felt like every planner system, every system that I tried to fit myself into was like trying to fit myself into something that hadn't been built for me, which PS is that's like what living in the patriarchy is. Mm-hmm. And so I just decided to create a new one that was actually based on how my body works, as opposed to trying to make my body fit into a system that wasn't ever designed for it in the first place.
So what was the result when you did that, when you really worked around that and honored that?
Oh my gosh, it's been wild. So I mean, the result has been tremendously increased revenue, tremendously increased visibility and impact in our business, and increasingly, having more responsibility in my life, because I ended up having a second baby, and I mentioned my husband was really sick for like 9 months, and so it was just amazing to witness. Okay, I can have all these extra things that I'm carrying, and yet if I lean into my own methodology, I can still not only just survive this and like come out on the other end, a shell of my former self. Instead, it was like, I can actually thrive through this and my business won't collapse. And I'm still going to be able to be, I'm the primary breadwinner in my family. And, it's just been amazing to see, even just during COVID, like being in shelter at home with no childcare and running our business with two full-time team members gone. Like, we have had record revenue months, and it still blows my mind. I mean, I think you can hear it in my voice.
You've astounded yourself
that this actually works.
By golly. This shit works.
Yeah, I mean, it's because it's so opposite, right? So the world has taught us, in order to be successful, you have to work so hard, and you have to trade a certain level of suffering and exhaustion for money or notoriety or achievement or whatever. And what I find is, as my coach Raw Goddess gave me this mantra, the more I relax, the more money I make. Mm-hmm. The more I relax, the bigger the moves.
Yeah.
And it's true.
So give our listeners something they could start with right now for the women listening on how they could implement something you teach in the book.
Great. So I would recommend, if you are somebody who has a regular-ish unmedicated cycle, start tracking your cycle and start learning about the different phases and what you feel like energetically each week of the month. Because what you'll find is, when you start to pay attention to it, those messages actually get louder and they get way more useful for you. So you'll have a week where you feel like starting a ton of things. You'll have a week where you feel like planning stuff. You'll have a week where you feel really social and you want to reach out. You'll have a week where you feel like completing things and you're really detail oriented. And you'll have a week where you feel more inward, more reflective, and more tapped into your intuition. And each one of those weeks is necessary for the conglomerate of your life or business. But we've just, no one ever told us that, like, inside of us is this code that we can crack to operate every aspect of our lives. And we've been trying to paddle upstream our whole lives, but when you turn your canoe around. So start tracking. You can use an app. You can use a pen and paper. I have a do less planner where you can use that. There's so many different options. You can use your Google Calendar, and just that alone, knowing where your body is in your cycle, is going to be amazing. And if you don't cycle for whatever reason, or if you have a medicated cycle and you're on, you take some sort of hormonal birth control, then I actually recommend tracking the moon, because the moon has the same 4 phases as our bodies. And there's incredible data with how the moon affects us as human beings energetically. And you will find that there's an energetic ebb and flow. It's a little more subtle, but it's still there. And, men and women, no matter what your gender expression is, we all have the moon going for us at all times. And that can give us a lot of information about when is the time to double down and put your foot on the gas, and when is the time to put your foot on the brake, so you can optimize your energy throughout the month.
There is a huge devaluing of the contraction of giving ourselves that space. And I've noticed over the years, I think you're familiar a bit with my work, but I typically work with the women in 7-8 figures. And often When they come through my door, when I find out how much they're really working, when I found out they've been to the hospital because they've drained their adrenals, when I find out, they're in a continual launch mode and we really dig deeper, I usually depends how, if I know them well, I'll go right there. If I don't, I wait maybe till the second or third session and then we really kind of start talking about that stuff. And it's life-changing. And often just with the right strategic eye, and often you need someone objective to help you with this, but like looking at what can be eliminated, looking at how you can increase profits while working less. But a lot of this depends on how we have to shift the metrics we value, don't we?
Yes.
Talk about that.
Well, that's an even bigger conversation. And I think that many of us are in the middle of it right now on steroids with the moment in history we're in. Of course, I don't know when this podcast is going to come out, but I think we can all agree this year so far has been intense. And so we are reevaluating. And it's, I feel like in my life at least personally, and I've spoken to so many clients and friends who are experiencing the same, it's like, everything got stripped away, and it's very Marie Kondo. It's like take everything out of your closet and then only put back in the things that spark joy. And for me and my husband, we sat down and we said, okay, as things are reopening a little bit and maybe we're emerging out of this intense time of contraction, maybe, what are we saying we want more of? What are the gifts we found during this time? And what are we saying, not having this thing during this time that was stripped away, we don't miss it at all, and we're never going back to it. So what are those two lists? Like basically the more of this list and the never again list. And I encourage all of us to be doing that right now, but at least also once a year to really reassess and say what actually matters, because there is not one person who gets to their deathbed and is like, I wish I had a larger Instagram following. I wish I had gotten more podcast downloads. I wish I had 500 people at that conference instead of 300. No one cares. I wish that I had, and the Bronnie Ware's book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, I wish I had given myself permission to be who I am instead of living according to other people's expectations. I wish that I had kept better in touch with friends and family. I wish I hadn't worked so much. These are the big regrets. I wish I had followed my dreams, things like that. And so we do need to look at our metrics, and we need to look at the qualitative so much more than the quantitative. And it doesn't mean we have a scorecard in our business, and every week we look at our list size, we look at our revenue, all that stuff really matters, but it can't be the end goal. It has to be within the matrix of why are you actually doing this? I mean, for me, I know that I do it to help more women live fully in their lives. And at the end of the day, like that's what I'm here for. And if having more customers is my metric to be able to know I'm doing that, great. But at the end of the day, like I don't have the illusion that somehow I'm going to be happier when I make X number of dollars, because we're just not.
I think I feel like I was a little ahead of my time at shutting down my big programs because I'd become disillusioned in the metrics I thought that mattered, rediscovered a new word called profit. And this was, right? No coincidence right after I had those babies, man. Yeah. I was like, get the red pen out. Let's go through all this. I'm lucky that I can slow down for a bit, take some time, decide what the next chapter is, just work with some clients I love. Some people I know behind the scenes viewed that as a tragic decision I made. And I'm like, let me get this straight. For someone to have just had twins, to decide to, gracefully dismantle some programs and things that weren't resonating, were taking too much time, too much effort, that I knew that I had such a greater calling that I needed time to tap into, it still wasn't understood at that time. I think right now, the great thing about this year, in the middle of the mess, and there'll probably be another mess by the time this comes out. The third thing must be coming. Locusts, I don't know. There's like end of days stuff going on. But, we are getting damn clear what is important to us, to our families, and our missions in our business. I mean, so many of us during this time have been called to greater leadership and how we can be of service. And I know you've been doing a lot of that over the last few months.
Yeah. And I think that, we are going to be continued to be called into that. And what's going to make all the difference is if we can stay in our bodies, tend to our physical needs, put our well-being first, tend to our nervous systems, really do that work, because it is only from that place of wholeness that we can truly serve, the way that we're meant to serve. And so that piece is so huge. And I love the story about you dismantling your programs and really stepping back. We did something similar a couple of years ago, and we increased our profit by 400%. Without increasing our revenue. It was like, oh, that was awesome.
Yeah, then it gets fun, actually. Once I do this with clients, they're like, ooh, and then we figured out how to do this and that, and they'll come back and I'm like, yeah, there you go. Unless your mission, I get why some people want to grow revenues to a certain point. Maybe it opens doors to certain circles as well, or awards or things. I remember for me, that first million especially was like, it was a milestone that I just had to do. But then beyond that, it kept getting higher and higher. And then I'm thinking, wait, this isn't leading me where I would be happy, I think, in the end. It's different for everybody at that time. And so, when we look at what's going on right now, well, first of all, everyone, you got to pick up the book, Do Less, A Revolutionary Approach to Time and Energy Management for Ambitious Women and Ones with Twins. Yes. And the advice in there, I think, was just so spot on. And I actually, I got a preview of the book. I ended up buying it. I was like, I'm going to read this myself while we're traveling. And then the thing that was interesting about, your family growing up, you learned to question things, right? Like you learned to question prescribed advice, you learned to question the status quo, and you're doing that now on your own. What do you think is important that women need to remember today, with everything happening in the world, with all the craziness and anxiety and even our physical health? We feel unsafe if we watch anything in the news. We're all told to be safe and think safety. It's like we're being put back in this survival mode. Tell me what we need to remember most right now.
Yes, I love this question so much. So what really struck me when I had my first daughter is that, and by the way, this applies to people who have not given birth. It was so wild how my body had known how to make her, and I didn't have to do any thinking about it. Like, my body made a liver, and then it made an ear, and I didn't have to put that on my to-do list, or like make a strategy or hire a team member. It's so amazing. So what's so incredible about the way we are wired is our bodies are keeping us alive right now, and we don't have to do anything about it. And so my advice or my reminder is really that, yes, do your research. Yes, do all that. And at the end of the day, you can find conflicting evidence that is really great data from great sources that is totally conflicting. And at the end of the day, we all have to build the practice and build the capacity to listen to our body's guidance and know what feels right for us, what feels right for our own families. And that may be different than what your neighbor chooses or your sister chooses. And it doesn't make you wrong. We are so incredibly diverse and we're just this wide array of humanity, and making different choices does not make us bad or wrong. It just makes us different. And in order to know what's right with you, you have to go inside instead of going outside.
Yeah. So trusting what we're feeling. I remember starting to do that when I had the twins, because you're surrounded by, I think that's the first moment. Before that, it's kind of like your health, and you're just dealing with yourself, and you could choose not to go to the doctor or deal with some of that stuff if you don't want to. But then like you got to go. And then suddenly they're like, we usually do this, and then you do this. And I'm like, wait, no, I want to understand. What is this? No, I don't want that. Maybe this. I suddenly really felt into what was right for my body and my babies. And it was kind of a milestone moment. And I think for many women, like you said, with kids or not, though, there's a moment when you go back and look at those times you trusted yourself. That's in your body.
Yes.
That's in your body.
Yes.
So
it's
important.
So powerful. Your body is the only thing that's going to be consistent your whole life. We know we're all dying, and we know that we're going to lose a lot of people, and that things are going to change. But what will not change is that you live in this body. So it's the only thing you have for the whole time. So you might as well get into right relationship with it and begin to listen, because it's the only guarantee.
Yeah. Yeah. See, now I'm ready for your mom's books on the menopause stuff.
Yeah.
And talk about like learning to re-listen to the body again. And it's like a whole new conversation, but it's been really tuning in again to my body and what's right for me and my health versus, different opinions and what women should be doing during this time. So that's the advice that's good for everyone. We don't know what's coming up the next year or two, but I have a feeling some more interesting adventures in government and who knows what's going on with the pandemic and all this, but like, ladies, stay true to whatever you feel. And we have to honor each other for our choices. I think that's my biggest wish for everybody right now. Social media is so polarizing, and you can see it's just getting worse this year. I don't know why we're shocked that we're like, oh, Facebook didn't bring us all together. But it's been very helpful as well to gain momentum for certain movements and things that needed to happen. But everyone just, honor each other's choices. Like, especially as women, I really feel like we need to band together again. And, choices are what have empowered us. They're what have empowered other people we'd like to help empower. Yeah. It's about freedom and choices. Yeah. And if we start shutting those down, there's going to be some problems. Mm-hmm. So that's very important to remember. Just honor, we have that wisdom inside. So Kate, tell us everything you have going on now. Where can people learn more? Where can people sign up for your courses?
Yeah. So the best place to get started is at katenorthrup.com. There's some great bonuses when you order Do Less. So you can go to katenorthrup.com/book. I have a membership for women who want to grow their businesses while doing less called Origin. And you can get on the wait list for that at origincollective.com. And if you want to connect on social, I'm most frequently on Instagram at Kate Northrup.
It's a happier place in general, isn't it?
I only go on Facebook when I'm going in my paid groups.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I've become more of an Instagram girl myself.
Totally.
Yeah. And that's where I started following you too.
Oh, I love that.
Last bits of advice for everyone. If you can give 3 pieces of advice to leave all the ladies with here.
Okay. So number 1, I think this is not a surprise. Listen to your body. Number 2 would be that to really know and get to know that your worth is not determined by your productivity, that you are worthy right now. You don't have to get another thing done in your life, and you're already worthy. So then it's sort of the question of, okay, what am I going to do if I'm not trying to prove anything? How will I move through the world? How will I work? How will I be if I already know that I am enough right now? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think the last one is really about boundaries and knowing that if it feels wrong to you, it's wrong for you. And you don't need to have any further explanation. Like, that's all the information you need.
I love that. Thank you for being who you are and being exactly who I thought you were. Do you know when you see someone online and then sometimes you talk to them or interview, or you're like, oh, they're not what I thought, or they're not what I expected, or that's not at all. Like, that's you. What we see online is you. What you write is you. It's you.
Oh, well, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for doing what you do. All right. Thanks for joining us, Kate. Have a great day in your little small town, USA. Have fun. Main Street. I'm going to see you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Glambition Radio. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe so you automatically get new shows every week. And I'd love if you left us a review. We are on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and other platforms. And I'd love to hear from you. Come join the conversation online. You'll mostly find me on Instagram, but also on Facebook, Twitter, and more. Just head to allybrown.com. You will find them all there. And you can also learn about upcoming opportunities to meet in person. Glambition Radio is the elevated conversation for women leaders, and I'm honored you've tuned in.